My name is Joshua Isaiah Hall. I'm a music student, and I'm going to cover how do we get from the Baroque period, the start of the Baroque period in 1600 to the end of the classical period. How do we get from Bach to Beethoven? Beethoven lived till 1827. We'll get there. The Baroque period featured functionality and predictability. Music was meant to be more simple. During those times, it was really written in figured bass, and it allowed for the melody to be played over this figured bass. It was very highly structured. It had a key tone, a very strong sense of a tonal center, and it layered melodies between the other voices. So in the Baroque period, you have three major composers: Johann Sebastian Bach, English composer; George Frederick Handel, German composer; Antonio Vivaldi, Italian composer. Their crowning works were the Mass in B minor. Bach's crowning works, anyway, were the Mass in B minor, the St. Matthew, St. Luke's, the Passions, as they're called, and his Brandenburg concertos. George Frederick Handel composed many different works, but Esther and Saul, these oratorios, the Messiah, which you think of when you think of the Messiah, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. That's the man. Israel, Egypt was an oratorio, but the reason why Israel, Egypt was such a transformative oratorio because it featured a double chorus that really had not happened before. Antonio Vivaldi composed the Four Seasons and his Gloria, number 589R. Very great piece. I just listened to the Charleston Symphony Orchestra, just played it on Saturday, this past Saturday. Very great performance. And so when this Baroque period really lasted from 1600 to 1750, and it was marked by the fact that Johann Sebastian Bach had died. That is the defining moment of the end of the Baroque period. So how do we get from the Baroque period now into this classical period? Well, Franz Joseph Haydn, born in 1731, died in 1809. He is known as the father of the symphony. If you want to talk about the symphony, you have to talk about Franz Joseph Haydn. He composed over 100 symphonies, two major choral oratorios, and of his crowning works were Die Schöpfung and Die Jahreszeiten. I wrote a paper on this. You should really read it. It's actually I really nerded out on this paper. But Die Schöpfung really told the chronological story of the creation of man. How did God create the world? So he utilizes the archangels Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, who narrate this story. The first movement in the creation, or Die Schöpfung, features, it's like the first movement is the destruction. It goes through like this chaos. I guess not destruction, but this chaos, and one of the hallmark points that I like anyway is you hear the archangel Raphael comes in. It's usually played by a bass or sung by a bass or a baritone, narrating the story. So then you have this development. The strings and the woodwinds are playing to illustrate, to paint this chaos that's occurred. And then the angel Gabriel comes in, and God saw the light, and it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. You should really go listen to it. Just listen to the first 10 minutes. You'll get my point. Another major work of his is his Hop 1, his 102 in B flat. But how he got how Haydn made Die Schöpfung and Die Jahreszeiten was literally because he went to go see George Frederick Handel's Messiah in Israel, Egypt, and he had this idea looming over his head. Wow, what am I going to create now? The creation. Very phenomenal piece. Then Franz Joseph Haydn really expanded the use of the woodwinds, which you'll notice during the first movement of Die Schöpfung, the creation. It gave the woodwinds were now given independent melodic roles. He expanded on emotional complexity and established the structure and the form of the symphony and instrumentation. So then moving forward, so now we're ushering in, now that Haydn was born in 1731, so now we're ushering into this era of Mozart, right? So now the Johann Sebastian Bach has died. It's 1750. Mozart was born in 1756. Mozart composed God Is Our Refuge at the age of 4. His pieces really featured elegance, emotional depth, and harmony. Mozart created his first symphony when he was 17, and he studied with Michael Haydn, which is the brother of Franz Joseph Haydn. That's where you get his classical foundations. Mozart only lived to the age of 35, and he composed 41 works in total. He was such a revolutionary. Just the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra did a Mozart 360. I really encourage you, implore you to ever, if they have a 360, you should really go. Christopher Ryan Lees. I know his name is Christopher Lees. He's the current conductor at the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra. Great presenter, by the way. And so, how you get from Mozart to Beethoven. So now we're going kind of between the eras. Mozart really expanded his lyricism and emotional depth. His works were often elegant and expressive. So let's start with Mozart's crowning works. So you hear, his Requiem, Lacrimosa, which he never really finished, but Lacrimosa iuta criem ut regent las ex favilla. That's one piece I do want to sing one day. Mozart had his last pieces, 39, 40, 41, were his last 3 composers. His 40th symphony is known as his Little G Minor Symphony, and his number 41 symphony, the Jupiter, it was the term Jupiter was coined by Johann Peter Salomon, who was an impresario of his day that helped sponsor the creation. Going between the time periods, he's a very influential person, and also his Missa Brevis. But Johann Sebastian Bach, I don't know why I said that, but Mozart borrowed from himself the motifs that he has in his credo, a part of his Missa Brevis, and Symphony Number 33 are highlighted in his last 3 symphonies, which is also in a paper that I wrote on Mozart's last 2 symphonies. I wrote a paper specifically on Symphony 40 and Symphony 41. So, Beethoven. Now we are ushering in Beethoven. He was born in 1770, so really towards the end of Mozart's life, towards the middle of Joseph Haydn's life. Mozart was a bridge composer. He had his early classical foundations from Franz Joseph Haydn. Between this period of like 1792 to 1802, that's where you really start to get his classical foundations. I want to say he was a pianist, a musician for the Tarazi family, the Terhouse family, and he had very complicated upbringings, but that's where he got his early classical foundations, was studying with Franz Joseph Haydn. His number 1 and number 2 symphony featured his number one symphony featured classical clarity. His second symphony was more playful and energetic. And you'll see how do we get from early classical foundations to his Opus 26, his last piano sonatas. So around, both Mozart composed 9 total symphonies. In 1802, so he was 32 when he started to go deaf. And so he wrote the Heiligenstadt Testament to his brothers. What do I do? I'm losing the essence of who I am because I'm going deaf. I can't hear anymore, and I'm making music. He wrote Immortal Beloved to a lover that is unknown to this day, still unknown to this day, even though there have been some speculations as to who that might be, who that person may be. He wrote Immortal Beloved. And during Beethoven's middle period, from 1803 to 1812, he really experienced the expansion and struggle because he was going deaf. That's why he made this Heiligenstadt Testament and Immortal Beloved. And so he kind of didn't really know what to do. Well, I guess he did, because then he made the Heroic Symphony, this Eroica, Opus number 55, this Heroic Symphony. It doubled the length. It was larger than any previous symphony. And the second movement, the Funeral March, is iconic. This, you hear the trumpets, dun, 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 dun. Then he made his Fate Symphony, number 5, Opus number 67. He wrote the entire symphony on these first 4 notes. Ba 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 bum, ba 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 bum, ba 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 ba. I'm just kidding. And so he made his middle period is where he started to make, he started to expand and struggle. And so what was really transformative about, or what was really influential, I'm gonna find a word, I have so many words in my head. What was really transformative about his Heroic Symphony is because he was going through this era of heroism. He didn't let his fate, it's often called the Fate Symphony, his number 5 is called the Fate Symphony, but his Heroic Symphony was that he started to use his deafness, use his disability to fuel him going forward and prospering. And so originally he was so enamored that Napoleon Bonaparte supported the French Revolution, advocated for the French people. He dedicated the symphony to him. Well, as we know, if you ever saw the movie, it's a great movie, by the way, called Napoleon. He ripped the dedication off of his Heroic Symphony because Napoleon Bonaparte declared himself to be the emperor, and the French didn't want a king. They didn't want to be under monarchical rule anymore. And so that's what made the Heroic Symphony so iconic. I mean, on top of the Funeral March and doubling the length. Well, in 1812, so this is towards the end of Beethoven's later period. He wrote his Ninth Symphony, which was his last and final symphony. It's featured Ode to Joy. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. It's a protest anthem. And how it was originally created was by a man named Schiller, maybe Franz Schiller. I know his last name is Schiller. Made this, well, it was actually composed in 1787. Then it got translated into a poem, and it's based upon a poem in about 1802. And then it got attributed to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony later on. And so the poem was put to, the text was put to notes. And there was a point that I wanted to make with that, and I can't remember. Ode to Joy. Oh, Undi Freude. It means joy. That's what the text that is how it got its correlation. So by the end of Beethoven's life, he made his final he made 6 final piano sonatas, but he made 132 first, then 130, and then 131. That's actually the order that they're written in. They're not written in numerical order. They are meant in the order that I just gave. 132, 130, and 131. Wrote a paper on this as well. His Missa Solemnis was first performed in another crowning work of Beethoven was his Missa Solemnis. It was first performed in 1824, and it was composed between 1819 and 1823. Again, let me remind you, Beethoven was beginning to experience his deafness in 1802. By 1824, he was already deaf. And they had to physically turn the man around because he could not hear the applause around him. And so they turned him around, and he saw that the crowd and everyone was clapping and applauding this work that he had made. And so his last one, opus number 26, the sonata in A-flat major, was void of any classical format. It didn't feature these early classical foundations in Franz Joseph Haydn and the Baroque period in which Haydn was initially born into. And so that's how we cover how Beethoven was intense and revolutionary. It was, he turned from an artist into a hero by the end of his life, and transformed the scale and dramatic power of music. And so a lot of traditionalists in that time period, they felt like there were two groups of people. Groups of people felt that, well, Beethoven had did it all. We don't really have to worry much about it. Wagner, it was like kind of Wagner versus Liszt. These traditionalists versus the radicalists. They said, oh, Beethoven did it all. And then on the other hand said that Beethoven could continue to be expanded. And so that's how we cover from get this in the camera. We covered the Baroque period in 1600 all the way to Beethoven in 1827. So I hope that this gives you some resemblance of how we covered this wide span period. And I hope that helps you. So thank you for listening to this video, and share, because it's me, I'm Joshua. Hi. Thanks. Peace out.